Show. Our first speaker tonight is Dean Carruth. Got it right. As we find ourselves in the midst of the annual Christmas marketing onslaught, our next speaker wants us to remember that Christmas is about much more than just getting more stuff. St. Nicholas was born during the 3rd century in the village of Patara, now on the southern coast of Turkey. His wealthy parents, who raised him to be a devout Christian, died in an epidemic when he was young. Obeying Jesus' words to sell what you own and give the money to the poor, Nicholas used his whole inheritance to assist the needy, the sick, and the suffering. While Nicholas lived many centuries ago, his influence is still with us. Tonight you will hear one tale of his influence as modified from a retelling by S.E. Schlosser. Please help me welcome Dean Carruth as he tells us about A Baker's Dozen.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Several years ago, before I retired and moved to Winthrop, I owned a successful bake shop in Richland, Washington. It was a good business. I had a good family. I had my health. I was happy and content. The trouble came to my shop one day in the guise of a gnarled old woman. She shuffled in the store in her closing time and pointed at my St. Nicholas cookies and said, "I want a dozen of those." So I carefully counted out 12 cookies for her. She frowned at me and said, "Only 12?" Of course, I knew immediately what she was after. Any of the other bakers in town were in the habit of giving a 13th cookie for free. This was a habit that I appalled. Giving things away for free. She said, "I asked for a dozen. You only gave me 12. Ma'am, the last time I checked, a dozen is 12. That is exactly what I have given you, no more and no less." She repeated her observation. "But I asked for a dozen. You only gave me 12. By now I was becoming annoyed. I'm a frugal man, a thrifty man. Yeah, okay, my wife says I'm cheap. She might have a point. But I just can't see giving things away for free. So I said, I have a family to support. I have bills to pay. I have retirement to plan for. If I give away all my baking for free, how am I going to do this? A dozen is 12. Take it or leave it. She said, "Very well," and stormed out the door. From that moment on, my luck took a turn for the worse. That night, thieves stole most of my cakes, and they were never caught. The bread that I baked for the next week was so heavy it sank through the grating into the fire in the oven. The following week, the bread was so light it started to float in the oven, and some of it went up the chimney and floated out across the parking lot. Needless to say, I was concerned to watch those things acting like balloons. And then I remembered the old woman that had come to my shop, and I became afraid because I realized I had been bewitched. The next week she came again. By now I'd gotten over my fright, and I was angry. And I said to her, "How dare you show your face in here when you've brought me such bad luck? What could possess you to come back again? Get out now!" And she left again. And of course that didn't help anything. Things got worse. My cakes collapsed. Cookies were tasteless. My donuts were disgusting. Many of my longtime customers stopped coming by because they heard about my cursed shop. The woman came again for a third time. And by this time I was really angry and stubborn. And she hardly got through the door. And I said, Be gone with you. Go back to the devil who appears to be your friend. Leave me alone. And she left. After that, none of my baking worked. The cakes fell. Everything was either too heavy or too light, had too much spice or not enough spice. It was just terrible. The only people still eating my baking were me and my family. And they were starting to hate me because it was truly awful stuff. Even my longtime customers that have been coming to me daily for years quit coming. My shop was empty, except for a little mouse that lived behind the floorboards. I realized that I had to do something. I was desperate. I was becoming unable to pay my bills. So I did something that I hadn't done in a very long time. I went to church to pray to St. Nicholas, the patron saint of merchants. I got down on my knees. St. Nicholas, I need your help. There's a wicked witch that's cursed my business, and I don't know what to do. I need your wise counsel and advice. The cathedral answered my plea with silence. The greatest sound in the whole church was that of the dust motes floating in the sunbeam. Wearily, I got up, trudged back to my shop, wondering what I was going to do. Out of habit, I made one more batch of St. Nicholas cookies. I put them in the oven, wondering, would they be overdone, underdone, too spicy, not spicy enough? Much to my amazement, when I took them out of the oven, they were perfect. So I eagerly frosted them and put them out for display, on display for everyone to see. Just as I finished that task, I saw a man standing in my shop who hadn't been there a second before. Immediately I recognized him, even though he didn't have his golden shaft, he didn't have his red bishop's robes or his mitred hat. I knew it was St. Nicholas. I knew it from his beard, gray beard, and his kindly eyes. Now, seeing a 1,700-year-old man suddenly appear in my shop was rather unsettling. My legs got a little bit weak. I had to take a seat next to the counter. He stood so close to me that I could have touched him. I looked into his eyes and he became sad, so sad that it made me want to cry. He looked down upon me and said, "My lad, I spent my entire life giving away money to those in need. I helped the sick and the suffering. I helped little children, because this is what God asked us to do. God has been generous to us. We should be generous to others." By then, I had a hard time looking him in the eyes. He put his hand on my shoulder gently and said, is the price of a cookie really too much to pay for the generosity that God is showing us? And with that, he was gone. While I was sitting there contemplating the words that he'd said, I heard the shop door open and a familiar shuffle approached the counter. It was the old woman asking for a baker's dozen of my freshly baked St. Nicholas cookies. So I carefully scooped out 13 cookies, put them in a bag, and I said to her, "Here, these are yours. Please take them." She gave me a quick nod, a small smile, said, "The spell is broken, but forevermore, a dozen shall be 13. And indeed, since that time, I've given more freely of my baking, my money, and my time. And forevermore, for me, a dozen shall be 13.